Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. Let me make sure this is actually on. Okay, it is. Anyway, so let's talk about this fight real quick, man. Because I want to give my prediction on this. It's been a month since I gave my last prediction, and I apologize a lot for that. I've missed a lot of fights that I should have commentated on. I apologize. I should have commentated on the Habib Nurmagomedov versus Justin Gaethje fight. I should have commentated on the Vasyl Lomachenko Teofimo Lopez aftermath. I should have commentated on the Terrence Crawford Kell Brook fight. But I didn't commentate on any of them, and I apologize for that. But I'm going to start doing it a hell of a lot more, and hopefully the channel will grow with that. But we'll see what happens. Anyway, bottom line is this, man. Heavyweight boxing is on fire right now. If you remember the Vladimir Klitschko era, in my opinion, was not necessarily the most talented era in heavyweight boxing, and a lot of people might disagree with that, but when you take a look at Vladimir Klitschko's career, there's not really a bunch of A-class names I think you can say that were on his resume, which would be a big part of the reason why I think when eventually he fought Tyson Fury, why Tyson Fury, in my opinion, pretty much outboxed him throughout the whole entire fight, because Vladimir Klitschko not only was not used to the size of Tyson Fury, of someone like Tyson Fury, excuse me, he was not used to someone with the skill set of a Tyson Fury and the movement and the speed of a Tyson Fury, especially for a man that size. But when it comes down to the overall, why am I saying all this? What is this all transitioning into? Basically, what I'm saying is this. Heavyweight boxing is back. I'm not saying that necessarily that all these fighters are as talented and as good technical wise as the, say 90s, where you had Mike Tyson, Evander Holyfield, Lennox Lewis, Riddick Bowe, and a couple others that I may be forgetting. But when it comes down to the overall, when it comes to the talent pool, it is at least, it's back enough to get us interested. The Vladimir Klitschko era was not a very interesting heavyweight era, in my opinion. This era is, because not only do you have the big three with Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder, and Tyson Fury, but when it comes down to it overall, you also have some other big names that maybe necessarily you want to call them A class, but they are top contenders. You got Joseph Parker, you got Luis Ortiz, you got Andrew Weese, you have Dillian White, and there's a couple of others that I may be missing. Alexander Povetkin is another one. A couple of others that I may be forgetting, but those are the main top contenders right now. Even a couple of others that, if they're not top 10, top 15, that'll give you very good fights. Carlos Takam and Derek Chisora. But when it comes down to it, man, the significance of this fight that is happening this Saturday between these two gentlemen right here is probably going to propel them to the level of a Luis Ortiz or an Andy Ruiz or something like that. It could get them a big fight like that next, and it will be a very interesting fight. The fight, of course, that I'm talking about that is going to be happening this weekend, ladies and gentlemen, is the Daniel Dubois versus Joe Joyce fight. I believe both of these gentlemen are from Britain, the UK. So once again, for heavyweight boxing especially, it is on fire for the Brits right now. So you got to be happy for them, and they got to be happy that they have so much talent in the pool right now. But when it comes down to it, man, who is going to win this fight and why? I find this fight to be very difficult to prognosticate and to predict, because to be quite honest with you, I could see this fight going either way. When I take a look at both fighters, I think both fighters are very flawed. And some people overall, they might see that clearly or they might disagree with me on that. From what I'm hearing, because I've been hearing about Danny Dubois for quite a while. Joe Joyce to me is a little bit more recent on the scene, even though I believe he's 35 years old. But when it comes down to it, I've been hearing about Joe Joyce for a little bit, and I've been hearing about Daniel Dubois for a while. Daniel Dubois is apparently supposed to be the next big thing in heavyweight boxing. Some people even say he's going to be the next Anthony Joshua or the next Tyson Fury, because he's British, so of course they compare him to those guys. But when it comes down to the overall, we'll see what happens. It'll be very interesting to see what happens. But maybe some people think Joe Joyce will become that. Anyway, who do I think is going to win this fight and why? Well, just to break it down, because I did not watch much of either Daniel Dubois or Joe Joyce until today, when I watched a couple of their fights, or at least a couple little glimpses of, the rounds and how they fight and how they handle things. This is a 50-50 fight. This fight could go either way. Both gentlemen have decent power. When I see Danny Dubois, when I seen his fight, I'm watching this fight right now against Richard Lartey. I believe overall is that one fight. Danny Dubois, a lot of the flaws that people say Anthony Joshua has, or some of the people saying that he's way too robotic and all this other stuff. Danny Dubois to me is even a little bit more robotic than Anthony Joshua. And a certain amount of people overall might disagree with me on that. And Joshua does have those problems. But when I take a look at Danny Dubois, the problems that I see him have, he gets hit a little bit too much. He doesn't cover a lot of the times when he needs to in certain combinations. He does have power, but it's not A-class power. And a certain amount of people might disagree with me on this. I don't think Danny Dubois, and I would be willing to bet on this, I don't think that he would knock out. I mean, that's not saying he couldn't, so I guess I shouldn't say that. Danny Dubois, he does not appear to me to be a guy, if he's going to fight one of the top heavyweights, I'm not sure if he's really going to be a one-punch knockout guy like a Deontay Wilder or an Anthony Joshua, to where they can knock you out with one shot. He just doesn't come across to me as that guy. And the way that I have been hearing about this guy, people were trying to hype him up as that. I just don't think he's that guy. But when I take a look at Joe Joyce is not really that type of puncher either. So both of them have power, but it's not really A-class power in my opinion. It's solid B-class power though, so you don't want to get hit by them. But it's probably on the same level of maybe an Andrew Ruiz if you want to go there, but some might say Andrew Ruiz has more than B-class power. It's up to you. But when it comes down to it, they have decent power, but also they have a lot of flaws. And I just mentioned some of Danny Dubois' flaws. Joe Joyce, I've noticed a certain amount of flaws as well. Joe Joyce overall, he also gets hit a little bit too much for his own good sometimes, and a lot of people have mentioned this point as well. He does have slow hands, especially compared to Danny Dubois. But this fight is so interesting because I have really no idea how this is going to turn out. This could end in a knockout. And one other thing about Danny Dubois that I've seen in this fight against Richard Lartey, actually multiple times, Danny Dubois, not only is he available to get hit at times, he is available to get hurt. It is not impossible to stun Danny Dubois. Now, that's not me saying that he has a very weak chin or anything like that, but if Joe Joyce could hit him with a good overhand right or a good counter, which I've seen him do before to certain opponents, Danny Dubois could get knocked out in this fight. And it would appear, actually, in my opinion, if anyone were to get knocked out more likely than the other fighter, it might actually be Danny Dubois. Because I've seen a couple of Joe Joyce's fights, and I've actually not seen Joe Joyce really get all that stunned. He seems to have a pretty solid shin, and Joe Joyce does appear to have a little bit of a better defense than Danny Dubois. Danny Dubois gets stunned with a lot of straight punches, especially a jab. They both actually have a very solid jab, in my opinion, at least for, prospects. But when it comes down to it overall, it's a very interesting fight. I think the early rounds will go to Danny Dubois. Joe Joyce, he seems to be somewhat of a slow starter. Danny Dubois seems to be somewhat of a fast starter. There's a decent chance that this fight could take place on the inside. Joe Joyce, although I'm not sure if he has as much power as Danny Dubois, Danny Dubois, when it comes down to it, if they were to go on the inside, that might actually favor Danny Dubois for the first few rounds. But I want to see overall how well they handle it after those first 5 rounds. It'll be very interesting because the second half of the fight might favor Joe Joyce. Now, I've not seen Danny Dubois necessarily tire out or anything, but most of his fights have ended within the first 5 rounds. So we're going to have to see how he handles in the biggest fight of his career, a 12-round fight against Joe Joyce. How long can he last? Can he, consistently keep it up for 12 rounds? So we'll have to see what happens there. Joe Joyce, he does move his head a little bit better than Danny Dubois from what I've seen, and a certain amount of people might disagree. It seems like his defense is a tad bit better than Danny Dubois from what I've seen as well. They both have a very solid jab, but Joe Joyce's hands are slower. It is very interesting how this fight could turn out. Both of them, I think, are going to have to work on their counter-punching ability. Joe Joyce does need to, in my opinion, because I've seen this a couple times, and I think Anthony Joshua has the same problem. Whenever he throws a left hook on the inside, he drops his right hand. Even though a lot of the times on the inside he will keep his hands up so he can block a shot, he will have to worry about that a little bit because Danny Dubois does have a very good stinger of a left hand. And Danny Dubois needs to keep both of his he needs to keep his hands up in general, because when he's throwing, sometimes he gets a little bit too wild and crazy and he doesn't keep either hand up and he's available to get hit and hurt. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens. One gets a little bit too wild and crazy. One also, even though I think he's a little bit better defensively, still needs to keep his hands up a little bit more, especially because his hands are going to be probably a decent amount slower than Danny Dubois' punches. But it's just going to be so interesting when it comes down to the overall, man. And I didn't think I was going to do this, but, well, my final prediction, I'm trying to think who I'm going to go with here, because this is such a tough one overall. I can't really 100% decide, because this is really a coin toss to me. On the inside in the early rounds, I think it'll favor Danny Dubois, but I'm not sure how long it'll favor him. Joyce has decent power. Danny Dubois can be hurt, and I don't think Joyce is just going to go in there straight away and try and fight him, on the inside all the time. I think he also likes to pick you apart a little bit from the outside. I think Danny Dubois will actually be on the outside here. I think Joyce will try to pressure him. If it goes on the inside for a little bit, it'll be interesting. But overall, Danny Dubois might take, he might take the fight to him for the first couple of rounds. If Joyce is not careful, then he can get knocked out. But from what I see, Joyce, if that happens, he probably would box him a little bit on the outside. And Joyce, you could debate who is a better pure boxer between the two, and a certain amount of people might disagree. But Joyce, just with his movements and his footwork and a certain amount of other things, I actually would debate that Joyce is a little bit of the natural better boxer than Danny Dubois, even though people would disagree. But it's just going to be very interesting. Joyce seems to also have consistent stamina. I do still have that question for Danny Dubois. I think that his pressure might make Danny Dubois uncomfortable. I do think Joyce will be on the front foot in this fight. I think it's going to be very interesting. We'll see what happens. Danny Dubois' hands are faster. It's a 50-50 fight, and I can't believe I'm doing this because I didn't think I was going to do this at first. But I'm going to go with Joyce by either late round stoppage or overall, unanimous decision. Not too comfortable with my prediction. But with that being said, this is a 50-50 fight, and I could easily seeing it go the other way. If Joyce is not careful on the inside, Danny Dubois certainly could pick him apart. We'll see how well his stamina is. This is going to determine overall, if they get probably into the top 10 sooner than later. And when it comes down to the overall, whoever's the winner of this fight is probably going to get a decently big fight next. So whether that be Luis Ortiz, whether that be Andrew Ruiz, or, Alexander Povetkin even, that would be a great fight. Dillian White, one of those guys. I'd love to see the winner of this fight maybe fight a Dillian White. That'd be very interesting, especially if Dillian White can get that rematch against Alexander Povetkin. That'd be a very interesting fight. But anyways, guys, that's really about it for now. Joseph Parker also as well. That's really about it for now. My prediction is Joyce, and that's a very tough prediction. But that's my prediction for now. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Thank you guys so much for watching, and let me know who you picked for this fight and who the winner is going to be. Please let me know. Thank you guys so much for watching. You guys are awesome, and I'll talk to y'all later.